and they booed me. And I got death threats because my address was in the video from Obama supporters and people calling me whore and skank.
Not only a party would allow this, but that our own citizens would perpetrate this against one another when we have stood firm for everyone's ability to vote.
They made a huge distinction between not allowing someone to vote and allowing people who shouldn't be allowed to vote to counteract that.
And you saw that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It is my opinion that right now party business is trumping the freedom of the vote.
Much more democratic not to have a caucus system and, in fact, to have popular vote with all those protections.
I believe in democratic principles. My question is, does my party believe in democratic principles?
Let's say they want everybody in this party to unite and get behind one person, and you're cutting up each other on the floor.
Some people saw outright cheating. Other people just saw strong-arm tactics. I saw fraud.
They have manipulated the system. They knew exactly how to do it, and they knew how to corrupt the process.
We have the numbers. We don't have to follow the rules.
So I think the strategy was to bring in a huge number of people, overwhelm the system, and in the chaos that ensued, they could steal the election. That is my personal opinion.
I'm entirely convinced there wasn't vote fraud in states like North Carolina. And I know people in the Clinton campaign who thought that if they had the money and the time, they could have shown North Carolina and Indiana there was fraud committed to help Obama.
Probably the worst thing that we saw in Indiana was parents coming into the office saying that the Gary Public School System had bused their children to Crown Point, Indiana to vote in the election. And that was great. That's a great civics lesson. But if children were being told to go to the polls and vote for Obama, in which they were, then parents were livid and they were outraged and they wanted to know what could be done about this. And so they brought in an actual slate of candidates that each student had been given to take them to the polls to vote for Mr. Obama and his slate. It was atrocious because what lesson in civics were the kids learning that day? What? Win by any means necessary? Because the right to vote is a sacred vote in America, so how could we take school children, bust them on a school day, tell them who to vote for, then pay for their lunch and dismiss them from school early on taxpayer money? So yes, the voter fraud was rampant in Gary.
They jumped, and then they were trying to see there, you raised your arm.
And you voted, they told me. This man said, you voted. Yeah, for Obama. Bent into my face. Like, what are you doing in my face? Telling me that, yes. Telling me I had voted, that I had done all this and that. And I said, no, I didn't. He said, you had your hand up, and I said, no, I didn't, but I talk with my hands.
And I came to Indiana early afternoon, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And in coming off the expressway, I was just sort of riding through the communities to sort of get a feel for what was going on. I had not gone to the office yet. And I was driving down a street, and it was off of Grant Street, but I can't remember where. There were some guys that had put up lawn chairs in front of the door on the walkway going into the, it was some kind of community center or something. And there was, so I got out, I stopped and parked my car, got out of the car, and there was this lady, probably about 80 years old, who was sort of walking slowly up the street. And as she was approaching the entranceway to go into the building, one of the young men said to her, if you're not voting for Obama, go home, because you're not voting here today. And she turned and walked away. The pain that I felt because of the people who have fought for African Americans to have the right to vote, And this fight has been a battle that has gone on for many, many, many years. And to see two African American young men denied the right under a veiled threat of violence to a woman who was the elder, a woman who looked to be around 80 years old, and not allowing her the opportunity to vote, I found appalling. Whereas while I was standing there, there were other people approaching, maybe 4 or 5 people approaching. And when they heard that, they all turned and walked away, or continued to walk in the direction that they were going in.
I will not be silent now. I have got to tell the truth, and I won't step down just 'cause you asked me to. When you lie and cheat and steal, bury your own to make a deal. I've been in chains and I don't like the way it feels. Bet you got a cure.